But in our next segment here, we're going to bring on one of my favorite guests that we get to talk to every week, and that is Alan Adler. Alan, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, guys. And just one word to start, zoinks. Isn't that a Scooby term? Zoinks? I believe it
Definitely
is. Or zoink. Maybe it's singular. I don't know. Anyway, I do a pretty mean Scrappy imitation, but I won't bother. Okay.
We're going to have to ask for that Scrappy imitation, I think, by the end of this show or this segment here. But Alan, we're talking about one of my favorite terms in economics, and that is incentives, because that's what a lot of activity is going to be built around. What's in this latest edition that you have going on here?
Okay, so we took a bit of a deep dive this week into the HVIP program. This is the hydrogen and hybrid and electric truck incentive program that California runs. We've talked about it off and on in the past and made reference to it. Just about every truck company or truck maker that gets eligibility for the incentive program puts out a press release about it. But the HVIP program itself, which is run by a group called CalSTART, they're a clean transportation advocacy group. They administer, get this, $430 million worth of incentives for electric trucks in California. That is a lot of money. Most of it is claimed, by the way, already. There's about I want to say $31 million left that hasn't been spoken for so far. But we take a look at sort of how California has used a carrot and stick approach, carrot being this HVIP program and stick being regulations, to clean up mobile pollution on the roads out there. And HVIP is a fascinating program. It's the model for what a lot of other states are doing. New York this week, started its own version of that with $185,000 incentive for each electric truck, as long as you're willing to scrap an old truck in its place. Nikola was one of the first to announce that it has qualified for that program. There's about 8 electric trucks that you can choose from, Class 8 trucks in California. So this is required. This is necessary to get beyond single-digit purchases for electric trucks is to incentivize these.
Regarding some of that data, we know there's hundreds of millions of dollars floating around, only 30 million left. Is this something that a lot of, in your research, do we know who's managed to claim it so far? Large fleets taking advantage of these vouchers, or are we thinking like smaller owner-operators who want to have a greener rig, so to speak?
The large guys are the ones who soak up most of it, but I've got, we know about one startup that's done very, very well called Watt EV. We wrote about them last week, as a matter of fact, in terms of the sort of trucking as a service startup up in California for starters, and then they'll move on. But they picked up 50 of these HVIP incentives at the true maximum of $168,000 each, because they're using them in drayage, which qualifies for $30,000 is on top of the $120,000 base, plus another what would be $18,000, because they're going to domicile these trucks in areas that California considers disadvantaged because of so much pollution. This would be around the ports and areas where, trucks are idling and, kind of spewing out nasty stuff all day long. So, these guys, big winners there. They got to the cap. You can't get more than 50 incentives. They got 50 of those. We know, for example, that Nikola, which is really one of the few companies to talk about how many purchase orders they've gotten that have these incentives attached, had 134 as of the end of April. So, both of those would be startups that are doing very well. Small fleets are a tough one for CalSTART. They actually have a set-aside program to help the companies that have 10 or fewer trucks, get in the program. I mean, these guys don't have grant writers on staff and people that, do some of the necessary things that are required to get the money. So, I think you're seeing a little more emphasis on them. And again, they have a separate pool of money to work from.
And Alan, and another topic here I think that you dive into is going to be zero emissions. And usually when we talk about it, it's like, hey, everyone pitch in, do their part. But we hear of a big player that's really kind of starting to make some big waves here.
Yeah, Walmart is interesting that way. I found them to be interesting over time in terms of what they will and won't talk about. But this blog post this week, really lays out what they expect to do with the bigger trucks. And they're looking at battery electric, which is not a surprise. They're looking at natural gas. They say they'll be the first customer for Cummins 15-liter natural gas engine. And the significance of that is that it basically is just as powerful as a diesel. The numbers, I don't have them off the top of my head, are very good on torque and that sort of thing. It's a lighter engine, lighter weight engine, as well as something that it really will cost a little less too. So Walmart has signed up for those, and we'll see how that goes. They're also looking at Freightliner Electrics, and here's Nikola again is in the consideration set. And when Nikola was mentioned in this blog post, stock shot up for a little bit on Wednesday. They have a hard time sustaining that, but it was a nice boost for the day.
Now, do you feel like we're talking about not only electric, but LNG, natural gas? Is there any concerns that this LNG may just be a potential stepping stone compared to full electric vehicle deployment? Is there any worries that if Walmart and these other folks are buying and making these, that maybe they'll only last 10 years due to technology and batteries becoming much more efficient?
I think the answer to that, Thomas, is renewable natural gas coming from, basically a dairy animal waste, if you will, and other bio type of stuff. It's not obviously petroleum based, and it does have a profile that can be zero, kind of a negative zero emissions when it's counted. So what Walmart is doing is they're taking these natural gas trucks from Cummins, they're working with Chevron to link it into renewable natural gas. And in California, here comes the money again. They're paying people to go ahead or requiring, if you're going to run a natural gas truck in their state, that you're going to use their produced RNG. And there are a lot of renewable natural gas operations, coming into play now.
And Alan, when chatting with Danny Gomez from time to time around net zero carbon and different aspects around it, he always sometimes mentions how far behind we are in Europe. With this aspect, are we taking any cues from Europe with this technology, or is it something that's really kind of brand new and just kind of leading its own way?
Well, I think our leader here obviously is California. I mean, they put the advanced clean trucks rule into effect, and that's on the regulation side, the stick, if you will. And I think a lot of states, you've got 15 states that said they would go along with what California was doing. So far, 6 have signed up and are sort of mirroring that program. So I think rather than compare it to Europe, where you do have very stringent standards, they don't homologate well here. Your roads are different here, wider open roads and things like that makes stuff like, even though arguably, Europe does lead the U.S. both in hydrogen and in electric adoption, you've got a really good open market for hydrogen here. In fact, just this morning, you've got a potential of a level 4 autonomous hydrogen truck that is being started, a company that's being started by one of the co-founders of Too Simple. We'll have a story on that later today. But, just a ton of opportunity here. So I think the comparisons are a little difficult, but in this country, we have one state, and that's California, that's leading kind of what everyone's doing.
I wanted to circle back real quick. You mentioned renewable gas, natural gas sources, and that cows would be one of them, as well as incentives for it has to be produced. We heard a lot of times in California that happy cows produce happy California dairy products. Do you think now that this may be happy cows produce nice methane or happy gas products? Is this the potential for California to utilize their dairy a little bit more efficiently?
I don't know about that, but happy cows would have to be regular cows, right? I mean, cows that stay regular would have to be happy. And therefore, think about it. I can't answer that one, Thomas. You got me. I don't know much about their dairy industry, but I do know that they are making a lot of moves in the RNG space because of its opportunities, for the emissions profile, capping off natural gas, flaring and things like that, and using that to create, hydrogen and other, fuels is definitely something that's gaining popularity.
Awesome, Alan. Definitely want to avoid those mad cows. Before we let you go, when can we expect this newsletter to come out?
It is scheduled, baby. It is up for 11 o'clock this morning. Make sure we didn't get to it here, but we did have a video of a really cool swap out being done. Oh, there you go. Really cool swap out being done with the Kodiak robotics truck in terms of how it can basically a technician without any special training can swap out one of these modules you're seeing that contains both the cameras and the there in the bottom of the LiDARs, but the cameras and radars in a single unit. They basically have built all of this into, it looks like a stereo speaker really, but it's the mirror and everything that you need for the, for some of the vision work that's necessary in an autonomous truck. And this is a pretty cool thing. We wrote about it months ago, but what the point they're trying to make is that it's easy to swap one of these as it is to change a tire on the truck. That's only easy if you know what you're doing, by the way.
Like it. From my experiences in trucking, you'd be surprised how many times they back into a spot and take off your mirrors. So having that ability for a quick swap, that's actually a game changer. I do not want to talk about on air of how long I've had to wait for roadside to fix something as simple as a mirror. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah, well, these mirrors, these are tech-infused mirrors at this point. You knock one of these bad boys off and, hopefully, as I say, they got one for you. But the idea of packing everything into one place just helps with the aesthetics and a lot of things that, these sort of Frankenstein-like trucks will hopefully be going away over time.
Alan, well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Before we let you go, do you have a Scrappy Doo sign off for us?
Let me think about this. Hold on, let me try to do it. Scooby snacks. Yes. I never should have pitched myself that way.
We'll take it.
My son is better at it than I am.
We'll take it. Well, Alan, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We'll be sure to follow up with you again next week. Right now, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with more Freightless Now.